Yeah, good evening and welcome again to this video series from Global Associates. I'm Mohammed Ashik Khan, the managing partner and the principal consultant of GBS and Global Associates. I just thought of taking through this part of the discussion where over or under absorption calculation and the graphical interpretation. If you want to get more understanding about overhead absorption, please go through my previous video, which is uploaded in my YouTube channel, Mohammed Ashik Khan or Global Associates. Let's get into this now. Now, let's find out the calculation. The calculation is that you have to take the overhead absorbed and minus overhead incurred. Now, if you are wondering what is really the overhead absorbed, how we find out that, where you will have the overhead absorption rate into actual activity. You find out the overhead absorption rate. The overhead absorption rate can be calculated how? The overhead absorption rate is budgeted overhead divided by budgeted activity. So that will give you overhead absorption rate, and then when you multiply overhead absorption rate by actual activity, that will give you overhead absorbed. And overhead incurred is otherwise actual overhead. The interpretation here is that for this, when you have the answer, a plus answer, when you have a positive answer for this, that means there is over absorbed. That will be over absorbed. On the other hand, if you have a minus answer, that means it is under absorbed. That is under absorbed. When you are calculation to this, giving you a positive answer will give you overhead over absorbed, and the minus answer will give you under absorbed. When we have an overhead positive answer for this has to be taken to profit and loss account as a credit entry. But when it's underabsorbed, then in the profit and loss account, you have to record it as a debit entry, and the credit entry will be considered like another income, whereas the debit entry will be considered like an expense. So, and also, you also need to find out the reasons for over or under absorption. So the reasons for over or under absorption can be either difference between actual and budgeted overheads. That's one possible reason. The second possible reason is difference between budgeted and actual activity. That's another reason. And the third one, combination of the both. Combination of the both, which will lead you to calculate the different calculation for overhead absorption, which you can compare with actual overhead. So these are some of the reasons. In exams, you might be tested on these as well. So be wary in multiple choice questions that you may be questioned on these areas too. Then We will now try to interpret the similar situation in a graphical format. So I will jot down the cost on the y-axis, activity on the x-axis, and let me note down the budgeted overhead here. Generally, overhead is the nature of a fixed cost nature, so therefore that will move parallel to x-axis, and this I will name it as budgeted overheads. And let me graph or draw the actual overhead. In this situation, actual overhead is greater than budgeted overheads. So this is actual overhead. Also, let me draw the overhead absorbed. Overhead absorbed, as you know, the calculation is overhead absorbed is equal to OAR. This is constant, we call it K, and actual activity. So, accordingly, a diagram of this manner will be drawn like that. Now, if you see at this point, my budgeted overhead is equal to overhead absorbed, where the activity level here, this activity will be budgeted activity. Now let us draw a given actual activity, in this way, and you can see this calculation here is the overhead absorbed, and at this point is our actual overhead. So we have a gap here. This gap is the difference between actual overhead, which is greater, compared to the overhead absorbed. So, according to my equation, if you follow my equation here, accordingly, the diagram, based on that, this has to be under absorbed. Now let us change the scenario now accordingly. So, and this total here. Now this total here is the overhead absorbed. So, and that difference is the over and absorbed, and this total here is the actual overhead or overhead incurred. And now, if I change the scenario, where I will take another actual activity here. Now you can see my overhead absorbed at this point is less than, my actual overhead is less than this is the overhead absorbed. Overhead absorbed is greater than the actual overhead. Second scenario, accordingly, this difference here is over absorbed. So this is how you graphically interpret the over and under absorption of overheads for overhead absorption calculation purposes. So with this, I will stop this video and I will produce the other related videos later. And for you to get more videos of this nature, please do like my video YouTube channel as well as subscribe and press the bell button so that you will be notified whenever I upload new videos. Thank you very much and keep watching our Global Associates technical video session. Thanks a lot.